I'm David Broten. Grew up on a farm near Viking and went to high school in Warren. I graduated in 1968. And after that, I ended up working around the farm, I guess, for a while. And I ended up working at Arctic Enterprises in Thief River. Got laid off, and then during the winter of 69, 70, I suppose, I decided to volunteer for the draft is what I did. 1970 was the first year they had the full lottery where there were no deferments. I'd had a college deferment before that. And my number was 186. And I assumed I was going to get drafted anyway because I'd heard they were going to go up to 225, just a rumor. And I found out maybe 7, 8 years ago, I looked it up, you can find that. They went to 200 and some that year, or 190 some. Anyway, I would have got drafted anyway.
But that was a lottery number?
Yeah.
Okay.
186 was my lottery number, and it went maybe to 195, something like that. So I would have gotten drafted that year anyway, I guess. So that's why I did the right thing, I guess, by going in earlier and getting it over with.
So did you volunteer for the draft? Or
I volunteered for the draft.
Okay.
Went to the office upstairs here in the courthouse and saw Hazelhurst like everybody else my age did at that time.
Okay.
And I suppose I had to sign some papers and whatnot. And I didn't tell my parents that I'd done that. I told my friends, and then when Darrell told his mother, and his mother told my grandma at church, and my grandma told my mother. That's how it got around back to my parents. So that was kind of interesting.
Okay.
Anyway, then I went, actually reported March 24th of 1970 that they ended up in Fargo at the induction center, they call it, I believe. And I suppose I got sworn in there and examined and all that stuff, and then ended up getting on a plane there and going to Fort Lewis for basic training, Fort Lewis, Washington. And I think everybody probably had the same kind of basic training back then, the bivouacs, and I was a squad leader.
What was your unit number, you remember?
C51 is what I remember.
Because I went in on the 13th.
Yeah.
March 13th, I went to Fargo.
Yeah, okay.
I was Echo 3 too, so,
Yeah.
so we were there same time.
Yeah, C51, they wouldn't let us off the base anyway. I never got off the base for all basic. Got my head shaved. And
was there a meningitis scare at that time?
I don't remember that. Our drill sergeant's name was Gunderson, and he volunteered me to be a squad leader. He liked my marching, and at the high school here we had this phy ed teacher that taught us to march, believe it or not. So that's how I got to be a squad leader. I think it was all his fault. And then the low crawl bivouac out in the woods. The forests were really beautiful there. We could see Mount Rainier from the barracks and the yard all the time unless it was rainy. And it rained quite a bit. Snow fell on Easter of that year. I don't remember that. That was the first snow on Easter in a long time, the way it sounded.
So what's some of the things you did? I mean, you did a lot of marching, going to school.
Yeah.
What's some of the other stuff?
Let's see, picking up cigarette butts out in the yard.
Police call?
Yeah, policing the area, policing things up. The live fire exercise where we'd go down a trench and you'd hear the bullets hitting the bank up above us.
M60 machine gun?
Yeah, and then low crawl up to the front underneath barbed wire, I suppose, and they had some fake explosions going off, I don't know what else. And then on some of the field exercises, I was put up in a platform in a tree, a camouflage one probably, and I got to shoot at my own guys, shoot blanks at them with the M16. And, it's just a field exercise. And of course they all ducked right away and shot back at me with their blanks. So.
Do anything with a gas mask?
Oh yeah, we had, it's kind of a wood shack. It reminded me of the woodshed we had back home, but we would go in there with the gas mask on, and to show you how good it was, of course, they'd make you pull it off and breathe the tear gas. And you don't forget that smell very fast.
Name, rank, and get out?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, probably. And, what else? A lot of marching songs, we were airborne rangers, stuff like that, try to keep you all gung-ho and fired up about the military. Yeah.
So if you were a squad leader, you didn't have to do road guard duty, or what it called, what?
I suppose not, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. There were,
Stop traffic.
it was, I'm sure it was a World War I vintage barracks, you know, wood building. And there were three of us that roomed together upstairs. So there were three of the squad leaders up there. I suppose one was down.
Oh, that's right, squad leaders got their own room, that's right.
Yeah, oh yeah. Anyway, so I got through basic training and passed, and I was selected, a few of us were selected for artillery, so I won the lottery kind of there. I didn't get infantry.
Right.
And so we were sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and arrived there around, well, it seemed like 10 o'clock at night, and it was just sweltering heat. I never felt heat like that before. But that was probably just a warm-up for going to Vietnam.
With the humidity.
Yeah, yeah. And so there we, my MOS was called 13 Echo 20, which was a fire direction center. They had some different names for it, but so that's what my training was all about, was what to collect data from maybe a forward observer. Battalion headquarters would send out targets every now and then. You occasionally talk directly to forward observer, or there were suspect enemy locations. They had remote sensors that would go off and we'd fire on them. You know, it could have been set off by a cow or people, you know, who knows what, but we would do that every now and then. So that was in Vietnam, but back in artillery training, it was all book learning pretty much. First we learned to use the charts, and so we had books with all kinds of numbers in them. And then from there we went to like a slide rule arrangement. And then finally they showed us the computer that they had. It was called Freddy, Field Artillery Digital Automatic Computer. And it was run off batteries, and we'd run generators to keep the batteries charged up to run it. It apparently had a big hard drive on it, because when you fired it up, you'd hear this big thing wind up. And then when you shut it down, it would take a while for it to shut totally down. And what you would do with that, you'd have your gun locations all stored in there with calibration data. You'd have weather data in there. You'd put in layers of weather data that would supposedly help the guns fire more accurately. And then, of course, your target information. Anyway, the class, I won the award. I was the best in that class, and I got rewarded by being shipped to Vietnam. The last movie I saw before I left there was Woodstock. Which is kind of ironic. Went into Lawton, that was the local town there, and went to a movie and watched Woodstock. And then, so from there I got sent home maybe a week or two, something.
You got your orders for Vietnam?
Got my orders for Vietnam, and then they gave us a little vacation, so I got to go home for a while.
How many of the guys in your unit in this training unit went to Vietnam at that time?
I don't know exactly. I would say in my company, or my platoon, I suppose, I would think. I can only remember one or two that went, but there were several of us that went. I don't know if it was all of them, or I don't know why they would send them anywhere else, but I'm sure a pretty high percentage went.
Okay, and you got to go home for a couple weeks?
I'd say maybe 10 days, something like that, a week, I'm not sure. And I'd have to look at the record to see when they sent me out of there. And anyway, so I got to go home for a while, and then jumped on another puddle jumper. You know, these flights back then, like the one out to well, even the one from Fort Sill home, they probably made 5 stops on the way home. Every flight would go up in the air for an hour, then land. Up in the air for an hour or two, and land. And
what was your rank when you left Fort Sill?
well, I was probably up to a big, I was probably a PFC at that time.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure. You know, when you go in, you're an E1, and then you're an E2, and then PFC, and then over in Vietnam, I became Spec 4. That's as high as I got.
Okay. So you're home, do anything special before you?
I don't remember doing anything about it, actually. Just sat around the farm, I'm sure, and visited, and saw some buddies, and didn't do anything special. And then so I jumped on another puddle jumper and went to Oakland. And then that's Travis Air Force Base, I believe. I think, so there we, I don't know if we got our fatigues at that point or when we got our jungle fatigues or if that was in Vietnam, I'm not 100% sure on that. But then we got, they put us on I think I've determined it was like a stretch DC-9, something like that back then to fly to Vietnam. We flew to Anchorage and stopped there for a while. And I think one of my notes I indicate there are about 250 of us on that flight heading to Vietnam. And I've got pictures of looking out the window and seeing Vietnam for the first time.
What were the stewardesses like? Were you male stewardess, female?
No, I'd say they're all women. Yeah, I'd say so. And then so we flew directly into Vietnam. I got a picture taken out the window of my first sight, of our first sight. Everybody on the plane, I'm sure, was hanging out a window at that point, trying to see the ground. And I wrote on the back of the picture, you could have heard a pin drop, and I wrote on there, maybe even a feather drop on the ground. It was that quiet in the plane. That was pretty memorable. Anyway, we landed at Benoit, and then, so that's a big Air Force base, pretty close to Saigon, north of Saigon, I think, maybe northwest, something like that. And we stayed there for a couple days to get assigned to our units, is what happened at that point. And I remember laying around, what really impressed me were the helicopters, you know. And to this day, you can't hear a helicopter without trying to look at it and listen to it, you know. Mm-hmm. That's so ingrained in you because you heard that sound probably almost 24 hours a day for a year or however long you were in Vietnam. And so from there we got assigned to our units. And I traveled around Vietnam either in Chinooks, helicopters for shorter trips, and traveling around the country longer distances. It was a C-123 or C-130 cargo planes that had these nice web seats in them. They were real comfortable.
Do you remember that when the wheels come up, how much noise they made?
Oh yeah.
The C-130s, and then it got just vibrate, almost put you to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were quite a ride. And then.
So what unit what division were you assigned to? You remember?
Well, the first one was I was in 4th Infantry in An Khe Central Highlands, and then 4th to the 42nd, I believe, was our artillery. It was in a 105 battery. So I started out in a battery of little guns. There were 6 little 105s. You know, they were towable artillery pieces, so they fired around maybe that big, and they came attached to a brass canister, so it was all one piece to fire them. And then. So we went on K, there we maybe I got assigned to an actual battery at that point, and then we could hear guns firing around the area. You know, it was kind of interesting. You could hear artillery firing. That was really the first.
So you were actually on a fire base?
Yeah, we spent there a little time there, and then Chinooks hauled us out to LZ Winnie, was called, a little fire base on top of a hill, and we spent. So I got to Vietnam in August, so that was maybe September, maybe spent maybe 30, 90 days on that little fire base on the hilltop firing artillery.
So what was a day like on a fire base?
Well, typically, when I got there, I was in FDC, and our FDC was in a container. It was called a Connex, and it was maybe 6 feet wide, 7 feet high, 8 feet deep, with 2 doors on the front. And we had our radios in there, a table with the maps, our Freddy, our computer, and so that was dug into a hole in the ground. When we got there, one of the first things we saw was a sky crane bring a small dozer out, and he pushed out some pits. And this fire base, LZ, had been occupied before, so there were some rundown bunkers there, so we had to rebuild all of them. But so we fire artillery. You know, I told the guns what to fire, whether it's an HE high explosive round, a beehive, which fired little arrows out of it, or a firecracker round, which fires small, it goes up there and explodes and small little bomblets fall out, or there's illumination, a lot of different rounds. And then, but you tell them what round to fire, what fuse to put on it, what charge to put behind it, and then what direction and altitude, I forget what the terms were for that. typically in the evening, what we did, we supported an infantry unit. We'd fire Delta Tangos for them. So they'd settle down for the night, and they'd call in defensive targets. So they would say, you know, the enemy might approach from here, or over here, over here. So we'd fire one gun and zero it in on that area, and we'd record that location as a Delta Tango 1 or 2 or 3 for that.
You just fire smoke, or?
No, we fired a real round. Yep.
Okay.
And fired an HE round. So we had that recorded, and then so if they got or attacked during the night or had some activity on their perimeter, they could call us up and say, fire Delta Tango 3. And just like that, we knew what to fire, you know, so we could respond in maybe a minute or two, you know, to get the gun ready and then fire. So and then we'd fire the whole battery if we needed to. And so I was the one on the radio. You know, there were maybe 4 of us in FDC. We'd work 12 on, 12 off, you know, all day, whether I was with 8-inch batteries, 12 on, 12 off.
Did you have to do any guard duty, or?
Nope, never did, no.
But you had guys on your perimeter, I suppose the infantry did that.
Yeah, we must have had an infantry unit there. I don't remember that so much, but you know, that base was probably just a few acres, I'm thinking. It was pretty small. And then
What was the food like?
oh, it wasn't so bad, you know. We had sea rations, I suppose, when we were out there, and every now and then they'd bring in hot meals in these insulated containers, you know, that would have mashed potatoes and gravy and steak sometimes, you know, and so we'd set up a, you know, regular line and go through and get our food. I'd say for the most part of the sea rations, unless we were at a bigger base, and we would have mess hall.
Do you have any K rations at all?
No, I never had them, no. I remember looking at the year on our Cs to see if they were from World War II.
Yep.
The Ks were from World War II, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I never saw any K rations, no. So anyway, yeah, one of the experiences at LZ Winnie was when I first got there, maybe the FDC guys planned it this way, but I was in FDC with, you know, maybe 3 radios on a rack, and everybody else disappeared. I think they probably did it that way, now that I think back on it. And pretty soon they're all squawking. There's a helicopter coming in, and there's other people wanting this, and I had no idea what to do. You know, so some guy came in and told me what to do when a helicopter's landing. You throw smoke out, and they have to identify it, you know, so they know they're landing on the right base. And there isn't somebody out there trying to throw smoke and get them to land in enemy territory. You know, sort of stuff like that. And so finally we got out of there, though. And then at that point, our artillery unit was deactivating. That's where they sent the name home, or took it off the list, I think, of active units in Vietnam. And then sent the GIs and the artillery pieces to other units is all they did. So anyway, we convoyed to Queen Yan, went through a pass, kind of a mountain pass that was supposed to be kind of dangerous, but nothing happened there. And then from Queen Yan, I was there around Halloween that year. We got sent to our other units, and then from there, then I flew up to Da Nang, and that's the 24th Corps is what they call that, the military unit. That part of Vietnam was called I Corps, which is the north part. There's four corps there: I Corps, 2 Corps, 3, and 4 Corps was down in the south. And
So when you were there, did you go on R&R?
I did. I earned a couple R&Rs. All I did was go to China Beach in Da Nang, you know, and did a little body surfing. You know, you can actually float on salt water.
So you never went out of country?
I never went out of country. A lot of guys I knew went to Australia and Thailand and different places like that, but no, I never did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was saving my money. I left Vietnam like $1,000, you know, so I
Did good.
yeah, collecting my $85 in combat pay, and I think, I don't know what the base pay was, maybe around $100 a month, 120, I don't know what it was. But $85 in combat pay, that was pretty good.
Didn't have much to spend your money on.
No. You get some millet, you wouldn't get dollars, you get MPC, military payment certificates.
Were you ever around when they did an MPC change?
I don't recall that. You know, they did that, I suppose, so you couldn't, the Vietnamese couldn't use it or something like that.
Vietnamese would get so much money and
They wouldn't be counterfeited, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I never did. Not that I remember anyway. Well, at there in Da Nang, then we stayed there a few days. I don't recall how long. I was assigned to B Battery, 1st of the 39th Artillery, and the artillery there was the 8-inch howitzers at the time. So there'd be 4 8-inch howitzers in a battery. They're self-propelled guns, and so then I ended up going to Charlie 1, which is a permanent fire base, and which was located north of Dong Ha, maybe 5 miles from the DMZ from North Vietnam. And an 8-inch fires a 200-pound projectile, and I think he had about 7 charges of powder. All the powder was maybe 75 pounds worth of powder, and you'd tell the guns, charge 3, 4, or 5, depending on the range you were trying to fire.
So how far does 8-inch, how far can they shoot in?
8-inch had about, I think I looked up, about 17,000 meter range, which is about 10 or 12 miles, something like that. And then they could change the tubes on those 8-inch guns to a 175 millimeter, or it's an 8-inch howitzer. A howitzer is shoots more of a arcing trajectory. It's more accurate. You can change the tube if you want a long range to a 175 millimeter gun, which had about a 35-foot long tube, fired a 147-pound projectile, and you could put about 3 charges behind it, up to 75 pounds of powder or so. And it could go, like I say, about
That's a lot of loading.
20 miles. Yeah. Yeah, I never worked on the guns. They call themselves cannon cockers. We at FTC call them gun bunnies. I don't know what that is all about.
Yeah.
So you don't talk to them and call them a gun bunny.
Right.
And but I stood around the guns a fair amount when I was off duty, watching them fire, and they had a hydraulic lift to get the projectile up on there and shove it in, and then they shoved the powder in by hand and locked the breech, and the primer I think was like a small, like a shotgun shell, something like that, like a bracelet, maybe that size. And then watch them pull the lanyard and fire it. The tube would recoil way back. It had a nitrogen accumulator system on it, I believe, for a recoil.
Did they give them hearing protection back then?
Well, I got pictures of the guy firing guns. One guy's got his fingers in his ears. The guy pulling the lanyard has a finger in one ear, but they gave us, in basic, we had ear protection, you had a little tube you'd carry on your jacket here, and I think probably the 2 little things you'd shove in your ear with little flanges on them. They're supposed to, but I think they stayed in that little tube most of the time. And maybe out in the firing range we used them because they probably made us do it. But anyway, I think a lot of guys came back with hearing damage.
Were you ever privy to incoming from rockets or?
Yeah, from Charlie 1, we would probably didn't have much of anything. In March, February, we changed our tubes. January, we changed the tubes over 175 millimeter because we were heading to almost to Laos and this Lam Son 719 operation. So we started moving out there in February. We drove everything. I was the operator of the 577 Armored Personnel Carrier, which was when we traveled, all the radios and Freddie and all that stuff would go in that. And the guys would sit on top and I'd drive it. It drove like a dozer. It had a Allison automatic and a Detroit diesel in it and 2-lever steering. And so we go by the rock pile there, and I don't know, maybe it's, 30, 40 miles. We're driving from one side of Vietnam to the other. And so we stopped at Quai Son. We camped there a little bit, LZ Flexible, and then maybe one other stop, and we ended up right next to Laos. There's a formation called Coal Rock you can see on the Laotian side. It's a big rock face, and you always see that from where we were. So that was an operation where all the Vietnamese troops were in Laos. Apparently no Americans on the ground. They're all in the air in helicopters and all lined up on the West-South Vietnam border firing artillery out there. And so that's where we fired artillery, and we were there for about 17 days in March. We had incoming artillery fire.
Because everybody knows
Just about every day.
we were never in Laos.
No, nobody was in Laos. And that operation, I looked it up, and we fired about 2,000 plus rounds of ammunition. That worked out about 173 tons of ammo. Just our battery fired. So we were attached to another artillery unit. We were D battery, and the other 4 batteries are right close by. And so we're busy around the clock. One round, the first incoming I ever heard was friendly fire. Close by, a friend of mine were walking around the battery, and here a couple of rounds went off, maybe 500 yards away. It turned out it was our friendly fire. They had the wrong date on their gun.
You don't forget that day.
No, you don't, no. And then maybe a couple days later, then I hear something whistle overhead and land down on the river bank. That was incoming artillery fire. They were aiming at us now. And then that's kind of when you realize it's a real deal. So anyway, we had incoming artillery fire just about every day. In the Fire Direction Center, we're in radio contact with battalion headquarters. And whoever's on duty in FDC, and it was me 12 hours a day, we'd call in and say we're receiving rain. We called it rain. That was incoming artillery fire. So we had or whether it was rocket or artillery or whatever. So we had rain many, many days. We didn't lose anybody during that time period. A couple of the other batteries did, and one had a 175 round explode in the bore. And then
It had to be nasty.
yeah. Another one had a breech failure when they fired it, and the breech blew off the back and killed a guy. And other than that, we're pretty lucky. There were some guys killed there was an engineering group I saw. And I read about a lot of this because I was able to go to the National Archives and get a lot of daily reports. So if you ever want to check into your military history, that's a good place to go. Look for the daily reports. And every night it was called in, they write it all down, list it, and save it. So if there's KIAs, you're wounded, incoming, that's where I got records of all the days we had incoming fire.
Well, when you were there, did you know anybody? Did you run into anybody from Warren or area?
Never did, no. In basic, I had guys that were from Minnesota, other guys from the area, not from Warren, but there were guys from Fergus Falls and other parts of the state. But beyond that, I didn't run into anybody I knew. I knew guys from South Dakota. I think there was a guy in Vietnam from South Dakota. But no North Dakotans. There might have been, but I didn't get to know them if there were. So anyway, Laos, that operation, then all of the Vietnamese lost, and they were all pulling out. The guys I was with remember helicopters flying over with guys dangling from the skids, trying to get out of Laos. And then apparently there was an F-4, a Phantom Strike, not too far from where we were with secondaries. They figured they got the guy who was firing at us on a daily basis. They figured he was in a cave, so he pulled back and out of sight, and come out. It sounded like it was probably just one gun firing at us. But there had been a lot of activity around the area with the other batteries too. Getting out of there was kind of hard because QL 9, which is the highway that went up there, was blocked off a lot of the time by enemy activity. And so they got, when it was time to pull out, 2 of the batteries, they made it out, and they closed the highway because of enemy activity. Then they decided to send in a tank company to get us out of there.
So when you were on these fire bases, did they C-130s spray chemical while you were there?
No, I never saw any of that. No, I wouldn't. They'd quit spraying Agent Orange before I even got into the country. But I went through areas that had been sprayed a lot, like in a rock pile along QL9. That was enemy territory. They'd sprayed a lot. If you look at the old maps of spray patterns, you see it sprayed all over the place there. So you're driving around breathing dust and stuff like that. So you probably got exposed to it one way or another. Anyway. So anyway, they finally got us out of there. While we were at our little, they call it Lao prison area, that our fire base didn't even have a name. And one day we had it seemed like the artillery had come in around noon and supper time. So it's like those guys knew what they were doing. They knew our activity, didn't they? So they were watching us. And so I was down in my bunker. Maybe we'd received some incoming. So I was down in my bunker, and there was an explosion. And I was in a trench like this, and we had like culvert halves covered with sandbags. And so that was my little bunker. I was inside there. We had a sandbag wall on the outside, and then there was a mess tent and a truck backed up to it, or, right in the bottom of that dugout. And so there was an explosion right outside my bunker, and I opened my eyes, and it was black. So I kind of thought, I'd been killed. And then pretty soon I started seeing little pinholes of light. It turned out the artillery round had blown the tent over my entrance to my bunker. And and then so I finally got out of there, and I was covered in peas and carrots.
Hit the mess tent.
Yeah, hit the mess tent, and which was right outside my door, my bunker. And finally I got pictures of that. I never got my film from that time. I gave to another guy he was leaving, and he was going to send me the pictures. Well, he never did.
Do you know if it was a rocket or a motor, or?
It was artillery round. They figure it was maybe 75 millimeter or 100 millimeter artillery they were firing at us. And anyway, I finally got a picture of it, and I'm down there. I don't see my face, but there's a few of us sitting on our bunkers, kind of looking dazed, and this tent blowing up, and the truck, and so I made it through that. That was a pretty close call.
You were lucky that day.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, if that guy just tweaked his target just a hair, would have been a bad deal.
Yeah.
We had dusters for protection on the border when we first moved into that area. There were anti-aircraft guns they used for border guarding, and they run twin 40 millimeter cannons is what they fire.
A duster, is that a plane or?
No, it's on tracks.
It's on tracks?
It's on tracks, and we had one pulled in pretty close to me on our border, on our perimeter, and I suppose it's just showing off. He started firing they're twin 40s. They just fire one after the other. They feed magazines in like this from the top, and they're exploding rounds. But they saw the tree off for us, so we had a little better view of the
That's a big gun.
tree. Yeah,
40 millimeter.
yeah. It just took a few rounds saw that tree off. And then there's a guy I know in Moorhead now. He said he used to work on those. He said you could do the same thing with 50 caliber machine gun too.
Did you ever see a quad 50?
I've seen them. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear one?
No, I never
go
heard
up?
one fired.
They were pretty sweet sounding.
I bet they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got pictures of one of them.
So,
Well, anyway, the tank got us out of there. The tank picked up one battery, and then we followed the tanks out of there, and we got, I don't know, maybe I don't know how far out of that Bow area, going down QL9. I was following an M48 tank, and there was an explosion on the right side. It lifted up a little bit, and the track fell off. And so either hit a mine or RPG, or hit it from the woods over here. And I checked the records. It was an RPG, so it was a guy in the brush over here firing. And I thought the next one was going to come through the side of my big aluminum can I was driving. Never did. The guys up on top started firing. I grabbed the lever, dropped down, grabbed my rifle, came up, and we just started firing into the trees. There was nothing more that happened after that. But I picked up some of the tank crew. They jumped up on top with the other guys, and then I was able to make a left up on a bank and get around the tank and leave it there. That trip, I don't remember anything of that trip after that point. We had 4 guns coming out of there. Only one made it. The rest were all shot up or disabled somehow, engine failure, transmission. I don't know what, but so they went back in a day or two and retrieved them all, pulled them out of there. So we had to kind of reassemble our battery. Our battery was basically dead. You know, we only had one gun that could fire, so then we gradually pulled back and ended up finally worked our way back to Charlie 1 and got refitted, they called it, or we got guns back again. Charlie 1 was a place where we got incoming fire too. May 3rd we had a round come in. A rocket in that case. My 5.77 got hit by a rocket one day. Just splattered the side of it and didn't go through it, but it wrecked it, so I had to get a new one. And then we had one May 3rd, rocket hit a bunker 2 or 3 down from me. We were living in these giant culverts covered with dirt and sandbags. And they had a concrete floor in them, so they're maybe 7 feet high in the center and then probably maybe 8 feet wide. You know, we had bunks on both sides. But one rocket came right through that into one of the gun crew's bunkers and killed a guy. We had, one guy had a piece of rebar in his leg. So we took turns with an hacksaw sawing it off so we get him out of there. And it was like, I'd say it's probably 5/8 or 3/4 inch rebar jammed up in his leg. So we had and concrete attached to it, so we had to saw that off before we could get him on the dust off and get him out of there.
So they medevac come in and dust them off?
Yeah, we call it DMZ, dust off up there. And another base, J.J. Carroll, we moved there. We moved probably 15 times. I was looking at some of the records, maybe 15 times over the time I was with the battery at different fire bases, and we were supporting, you know, shooting bigger stuff. You know, and normally an infantry unit is probably supported by smaller artillery, you know, close-in stuff. With artillery we had was, say, a 100-meter kill radius. We weren't going to be trying to fire in close to any units, any friendly units. We were at another unit, or another base, J.J. Carroll.
So you moved around a lot.
Yeah, we moved around quite a bit, yeah. J.J. Carroll, we were there and had, we were in our bunkers off duty, and we heard some incoming and didn't think much of it. Turns out that that base had gotten about 40 rockets that night, and 2 of our guys were killed by one. One was killed that night. The other one, that was May 27th or something. The other guy died on July 4th, 71. And then there was a 3rd guy that had just transferred to our unit. I didn't know him at all, and he was killed by a rocket. So some of these rocket attacks are like that case. I had no idea it was that massive. There were 40 rockets came in at one night, but that kind of thing happened.
So a lot of rockets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so on that, when we're on the Laotian border, it was all artillery. Maybe there were some mortars, I don't know. And then back in the bigger fire bases, it was all rocket attacks, because I suppose they could stay farther back and launch them.
And it's pretty distinguishable between incoming and outgoing?
Well, I think the only thing you hear about incoming is when it explodes. You don't hear it come in because it's way beyond the speed of sound. You know, you probably hear the sound after it hits. I suppose that one we did hear, you seldom hear the outgoing when we're firing. No, you don't hear that at all. You just hear our gun firing. One time we fired during rain, fired 2 175s together, and then just in a matter of seconds you heard 2 more explosions up in the clouds. So the fuses aren't armed until it's out of ways, but the rain set them off. You know, so it was far enough down so we didn't get any steel falling on us, but somebody might have gotten some fragments down from that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, yeah, that was a lot of different experiences there.
So how long were you in Vietnam?
I got there on August 14th of 1970, and I left October 28th of 1971. They gave you this wonderful opportunity to spend extra time in Vietnam, and they let you out of the Army early. So I did that. You know, by that time I was from Charlie 1. We'd moved down to Camp Sally and Nancy. It was kind of a rear area, I guess I would call it, closer to Way in that area.
So you extended?
Yep, so I extended. They call it extending.
3 months?
2 months.
2 months?
So you extend to within 5 months of when you normally get out of the Army. So then I didn't want to go back home and then spend would have been 7 months in the Army stateside after being in Vietnam for a year. So that made total sense to me, and it was turned out was the right thing to do.
So, where did you go to fly out of Vietnam?
Well, what happened was we were at this Camp Sally, and on just a few days before that, of course, the northern part of the South Vietnam got hit by a typhoon. It was called Typhoon Hester, and it was like the strongest one they'd had there in quite a while. So we spent about 2 days in our bunker, and I'd look out the door occasionally, and I'd never seen horizontal rain before. But we probably had, I don't know, 100-mile-an-hour winds, I don't know. But so you look out the door, and the rain was going flat horizontally, and then you'd see chunks of corrugated metal flying through the air too. There were a lot of buildings had corrugated steel roofs. They were just blowing all over the place. So you really didn't dare go outside and anything like that.
I got some pictures of that after I got home.
Yeah?
A friend of mine sent them.
Oh, yeah?
It hit
Yeah.
July too, and it tore the place up pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah.
Sure it did. So we were kind of holed up there for a while, getting anxious about getting out of the country, because we were due to leave. And the roads were covered with water. There was a lot of standing water around here. So we got somewhere, and they came in with a chinook and picked us up, and ended up going to Cam Ranh Bay eventually. That's where we flew out of. And then spent a day or two there, I suppose. I think it was the 28th.
Did they drug test you there?
I don't remember that at all. They may have, I don't remember.
Okay. In Cam Ranh Bay, they give you new fatigues or something to go home?
Boy, I don't know. I don't remember. We had our duffel bags, and we're waiting to hear our name called, because when they call you, you better get going. You sure don't want to miss that flight.
What'd they call that plane? You remember?
I don't know. They might have called it a Freedom Bird. That would have made total sense. But the feeling of pulling off the ground there was something I never forget.
So what was it like on the plane when you left the ground?
I remember we had women for stewardesses again. We played cards. I have a deck of cards from that flight back, and looked out the window a lot, I'm sure. And we flew to Japan. So we spent a little time in a base in Japan, an Air Force base, I suppose, or whatever it was. I don't know. And then I bought a pair of Nikon binoculars. I remember that. And when I was in Vietnam, we got this PACEX catalog. It was a mail order catalog. Kent found mine when he was going through some of my mom's stuff she'd saved for me, and there it is, the PACEX catalog. And then I go in there and I see the camera I ordered and the stereo I ordered, all those things. I got a camera for $123, and I sent gifts home out of that. You'd fill out the form, and I suppose you just sent cash with it, or I don't know how you paid for stuff, but send it in, they'd mail order it home for you. Ship it home.
So you were in Japan, and then did you have another fuel stop?
No, that was it. Right to Fort Lewis, where I started in the Army. Back there and got bussed around, and
They give you a steak or anything when you?
they could. I don't remember. I don't remember what I ate, and they could have.
So.
They owed it to me. I know that.
So then you went to the airport. Was it? What people treat you like? You had to be in uniform for home, right?
Yeah, you got a free ticket that way.
Yeah, and did people?
I don't remember any of that. I never got mistreated anywhere along the line like some people were. I don't know if it was where I was or what, but I went there with a buddy. The guy I spent the most time with in FDC there, he was going to Texas, but we were at the airport together. And each took our own flights. I went down to see him about the following year. I picked up a guy in Sioux Falls, and we drove down to Tyler, Texas, and saw him and visited him and spent a few days down there.
So now you're discharged, right? You're out of the Army?
That was it. You're in the reserves, I guess. I didn't know that was going to happen, but you're actually technically in the reserves for a few more years.
You actually went to meetings and stuff?
No, but you're still part of the reserve.
Right. You got to leave them your
I didn't have to do anything, but
yeah.
The threat was always there. If they wanted you, they could pull you right back in.
Correct.
Yeah, probably in a hurry. So anyway, the one thing I didn't like about getting discharged was it was probably maybe 35, 40 degrees there. It wasn't that warm. And somebody said, don't wear your field jacket.
Where was this at?
At Fort Lewis.
Fort Lewis.
When
Oh,
we
you
were
were back
checking
at
out.
Fort Lewis, okay.
Yeah. And He said, leave your field jacket in your duffel bag. And I didn't. I wore it because it was cold. And then here this guy says, all of you that can prove you bought that field jacket you're wearing, show me the receipt. If not, it's our field jacket. Take it off and it's ours. So that's something I so wanted to bring home with me was my field jacket I had in Vietnam, but it wasn't going to happen. So they took it. And I should have listened and froze, and I would have had it yet. So anyway, I brought a few clothes home, my boots and fatigues, and so that, those are the mementos. I'd shipped all my photo albums home. Before I left Vietnam, I burnt up all my negatives. I don't know why I did that. I should have brought that stuff home. It would have been nice, but I burnt up a lot of stuff. All my letters. I didn't bring any letters home that I collected over there. It's a way you're trying to separate yourself from it, I think. So. But my mom saved all my letters, so that was nice to see, and my wife.
Yeah. So when you're out of the service, what are you doing?
Well, I got home, flew into Thief River, and other puddle jumper back home to Thief River, and my family was there waiting for me. And my mother told me recently how my dad thought I was so dark he couldn't believe the suntan I had. There were a couple other veterans that got off the plane, and they were just white. They were in the Navy. They had their whites on, I suppose. So they were below deck a lot. I don't know, but he thought I looked awful dark. And got home. One of my buddies came over right away, and I was impressed. My mother said she'd run when I was in the Army. She'd run into Hazelhurst every now and then in town. She'd ask how I was doing. You kind of think she just sent people off and forgot about them, but no, she cared about these boys. Anyway, then I went home. My first job afterwards, I signed up for work in the Newfoundland elevator, and I worked there, building the elevator. And it had a fire and burned down, so we're building a new elevator. I worked for Vegan Construction for a while. Actually, the first thing I did after the Army was go back to my old job at Arctic Enterprises. I worked for 2 weeks in Quindigat, and I went to the junior college that winter for a quarter. But I don't remember what I was getting paid before I went into the Army. But they had to give you your seniority because I was laid off. They give you your seniority just like you were working there all the time. So I was making $3.33 an hour. That was my big paycheck.
And that was at Arctic?
December of 1971.
And that was at Arctic?
At Arctic Enterprises in Thief River, doing assembly kind of work. They really didn't have a job for me, so I just filled in for people who were off or sick, or so I'd do one job one day, which just made it kind of interesting. Might have been putting mufflers on one day or seats, who knows what. But it was anyway. I did it for 2 weeks, and I didn't feel like I could do that anymore, so I dropped out of that. Went back to college for a little bit, and then that next year we went to next spring we drove down to Texas with that buddy from John Johnson from Sioux Falls, and then that next fall, then I went to Morehead State at that time, so I spent a couple of years at Morehead State finishing off an pre-engineering degree in North Dakota State University. I was getting a GI Bill at that time, and that amounted to maybe $400 a month, I think it was, something like that, $415, I don't recall exactly, but it helped. Matter of fact, I went to college till it ran out, then I quit. Then I had a master's degree in ag engineering, and so I don't know if I planned it out that way, but once the money ran out, I was done. I made it through that far. And then, so from there, I went to University of Wisconsin, lived there a while, came back here, got a job working, selling irrigation equipment and doing agricultural consulting, and then eventually I ended up with a company called General Diesel in Fargo. The irrigation company went out of business. Then the consulting company went out of business. I went to work for General Diesel. Another year they went out of business, so I had 3 in a row, one year after the other. And then a new company started up, General Equipment, and I told them, things look funny in a year, I'm out of here. And I was with them for 35 years, and they're still going. So that's been a good company to work for.
So you're retired now?
Yeah, I retired in the early pandemic, April of 2020.
Yeah.
So
And so, looking back on your military career, is there anything you wish you'd have done different, or?
Well, you know, they tried to get me to stay in the Army, and I passed up a couple of opportunities. You know, I made it to Spec 4. I think maybe other guys maybe would have made it to E5 if I'd worked a little harder when I was in the military or stayed in the full 2 years, you know, without really didn't mean much to me. And so I had no interest in staying in the Army, so it worked out pretty good the way it was. And I'm kind of doing this for my family and also for my grandchildren who are living in Madison, Alabama right now, or right near Huntsville, Alabama. All 5 grandchildren are down there, and their other grandpa, Lou, can't tell the story anymore, but he was in Vietnam in 68, 69 at Da Nang Air Force Base. He was a in the special police squadron. He was military police, guarding the runway and guarding aircraft. And
So he was there during TET?
yeah, he would have been there, yep. And he died about 2 years ago. So that's, I kind of want to, you know, doing some recording, you know, for my grandchildren, my own family, of course, so they don't have to drag everything out of me, you know, a little bit at a time. It's kind of what it amounts to.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I remember this, you know, and I remember that a little bit, you know, but here this has kind of got it all and yeah, put it all together.
Well, this has been a very interesting interview, means I've went through some of the stuff
Yeah.
you did.
We have a lot in common, that's right.
Now I'm gonna have flashbacks again.
Yeah, there you go. Did you get to see North Vietnam ever?
Pardon?
Did you get to see North Vietnam?
No, I did not.
Yeah, we had a excursion to Alpha 4 or Alpha 2, maybe it was Alpha 4, which was right on the DMZ. And across the border, they were flying a big North Vietnamese flag, which would have been right across the river, whatever that was. But so that was like an exercise. We went up there, set up with a couple of guns.
You had a big gun. You could have blown that flag away.
Oh yeah, even at Charlie 1, our Charge 2 range hit North. You could have hit North Vietnam, and Charge 3 would have gone way into North Vietnam. But supposedly we never fired up there, as far as I know.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you for doing this interview, and thank you very much for your service.
All right, well, I appreciate that. I do get a lot of thank yous when I go around, so that's I appreciate that, and you're welcome.
Thank you, Dave.